Hello, welcome to the latest version of the reality of tokenized private market assets with Inveniam. And we're really excited to have a panel here together of our tech leadership. Not all of it, but certainly a large portion of the brain trust. And we are particularly pleased to have Albert joining us as our new managing director of Inveniam AI. Inveniam has been helping our clients for a couple of years consume AI products. And what we're going to do now is we're formalizing this into a unit of the business. And Albert's joining us. Albert, why don't you introduce yourself real briefly?
Sure. So like Pat said, my name's Albert Berdellans. I'm very proud to be the newly minted managing director of Inveniam AI. And I want to make sure everyone sees that we are putting out applications for our alpha release of Inveniam AI. And we're going to drop a link to it in the comments, and we'll add it to the description of the video later. So make sure you click on that.
That's so wonderful. And we're joined by Kevin Cuddeback, who is our chief data scientist. And Kevin, why don't you give us a minute or two about yourself and the role that you play here at Inveniam?
Sure. My background is in a lot of data-driven marketing and building and marketing data-filled products. At Inveniam, I've been the guy for the last 5 years now, understanding the kind of deals that people want to tokenize, understanding the kind of data that would support the value of the tokenized assets, and figuring out how to collect it, how to validate it, how to get it on chain, and have it power those applications like valuation that it needs to for tokenization of assets to work. So currently I'm working on adding new chains where we will validate data and similar sort of technical sales role.
Fantastic. And Kevin's been with us for a couple minutes now, and we're super pleased that he's been on the team. I've known Kevin literally since I was in high school, and he was in college. But he's been a great member of the team. I'm going to go now to Rick, who is our CTO. Rick, thanks for joining us. And why don't you give us a minute on yourself and the role you play here at Inveniam?
Thanks, Pat. I think Kevin undersold himself. He's been a key contributor to the development of the entire ontology of information that we manage as well. So I'm CTO here. I'm in charge of software development, and I'm a guy who's been building software for a long time, mostly in financial services, in a combination of big companies. I've been CTO or CIO for 3 publicly traded companies, as well as worked at a number of PE and VC-backed companies. I've been involved at Inveniam since 2019, which is a long time for our market space, and been very pleased to lead the development and architecture of our platform.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have you here. And Tom, I'm gonna ask you to re-put that comment out there where there is a space between the word release and HTTPS. So thanks for doing that, brother. And Rick, Inveniam Inveniam is a tool that allows private market assets that are data rich, low frequency trading, that have a lot of unstructured data, that needs proof of origin of where that data came from in a federated data environment. And then we process this through a very fulsome, high-functioning multi-party workflow. And as we do that, we're anchoring the origin of the data, and we're providing proof of value of the asset and proof of process. But a lot of that data was unstructured data, right? And a lot of our customers were asking for structured data, and that's what turned us into a consumer of AI tools 2.5 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Pat. we started with the premise of collecting, validating, creating trust and confidence in fundamental and performance data for private market assets, both for use off-chain, but especially because we see a future for these real-world assets to trade on blockchains. And so also did a lot of work integrating with a great number of blockchains. But this is document-oriented stuff. It's PDFs and spreadsheets coming at us, right? The certificate of occupancy for a building, the partnership agreement for the LLC that owns the building. It's not all commercial real estate. It could be the corporate formation documents and bylaws for a private corporation, or the loan documents for private debt. Anyway, we were doing a great job of collecting this from many different places. We have robust workflows to control the jobs of getting the information and who needs to do what now, and once a month, once a quarter, once a year, etc. But the clients started asking us to share some of the data back in structures that could be computed with, as opposed to documents that could be read and understood by human beings. So we built a part of our system that we call AI Assist. And at first there wasn't very much AI assisting. It was present the document and the shopping list of data elements to find, and a person did it. But we've been exploring and implementing more and more AI to actually improve productivity. And we've had, I would say, our most dramatic successes to date in processing of tabular information, where if you imagine a table of just 10 rows and 10 columns, there are 100 data elements. And when a person had to get each one of those one at a time, it was terrible. And so we moved to where we could identify the columns, and now they can grab that data a whole row at a time, which is, if there are 10 columns, a 10x improvement in productivity, right? And we're now working more, and we're especially pleased to have Albert joining us to look at the large language models and some other natural language machine learning tools to find even less structured data. So, if it's a PDF, well, we look inside there and find the tabular stuff, and we're really good at automating that extraction. But finding the terms and conditions in the contract, when someone says, I want to understand the distribution of capital waterfall, right? We want to allow machine learning, allow AI to help us grab those things as well, to reduce the human involvement and increase the productivity of ingesting these documents and spitting out structured data that we can then deliver to other systems for computation.
And fundamentally, this is an on-ramp for data that exists in all sorts of unstructured ways, right, to come on chain and have an on-ramp with proof of origin, proof of process, proof of what the computation was, data in, data out, on off-chain, on-chain computation. And what we're doing is we're delivering this as an on-ramp for data, and we're helping our clients be better consumers of AI, right? Yeah. Albert, Rick, I'm gonna pass it over to Albert, right? And Albert, you came to us. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and kind of what makes you ideally suited to join us to bring this new alpha release of AI Assist to the markets, so that our customers can consume AI more efficiently, better, smarter.
Yeah, that's a great question, Pat. And I have a very interesting story to tell, because I took a meandering path to get here. And I think it'll be very useful for people to hear that even if you don't think you're in the data business, you're in the data business. So I remember the first time I really started to understand that businesses have problems with their data. It was my first job right out of grad school. I was in the music festival business. And at the time, there was an enormous event. The main event was in Miami, and it had 165,000 people attending. And there was a year where the principals were talking about whether they should change the age restriction. It was an all ages event. They wanted to change it to 18 plus. And my first question was, well, what percentage of your attendees currently are under 18? And they did not know. No earthly idea. Absolutely no clue. And it was a multi-million-dollar decision. So that was the first moment where I realized I was onto something with how businesses use their data. And fast forward 10 years later, I'm working for a large conglomerate owned by an Israeli billionaire who's the largest private landowner in Miami. His name's Moshe Mana, great guy. And the first conversations that we have about consolidating all of the market operations of various businesses, I'm talking about infrastructure and data. And it made sense intuitively for him to understand that you want to use the same set of trucks and buildings for different businesses for those synergies. But when it extended to using the same data for those businesses, it just didn't quite register. On one side of the business, you had a moving and storage company, one of the largest in the New York area. And on the other side, you had a high-end art storage facility, and and then an art sales business, and none of those entities share data at all. I said, well, look, you have customers waiting on every side of this. And then what really cemented it for me was we went through buying 200 something properties in the Miami area. And I would hear about, hey, we're going to buy this property. Make sure that, keep an eye out in case it makes the news. And then I would ask about it 8 months later, and they would say, no, that hasn't closed yet. And I was thinking, what in the world takes so long for some kind of transaction like that? And that led me, when I heard about what Inveniam was doing, about how data is managed in such a way that it shortens the runway for those types of deals. It really struck me as revolutionary. And it showed me that it was the next big way that businesses can leverage their data for their own success.
So talk to us a little bit about that then, because you're going to be leading AI Assist. We want some client partners, right? We already have some who are going to say, I'm willing to be an AI Assist alpha release user, right? To give us feedback, to say, here's what I like about it, here's what I don't like about it, where we can help them gain access to multiple AI solutions through one interface, right? Whether it's AWS Textract, which is what we use all day, every day, as Rick was talking about, inside our solution, or ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, or IBM's Discovery Labs, or whatever it might be. And we say, hey, listen, what's the right tool that you need to take this unstructured data and deliver this structured data through a workflow that Inveniam's doing to power the administration of your entire alts portfolio, right? So that's kind of what we're delivering and what we're looking for broadly. But I want to tee this up. What is AI Assist going to deliver to the customer? But not only what is AI Assist going to deliver to the customer, who are the customers you want diving into this that are going to help you, that's going to transform the alts market?
So it's a broad question. Let's take it in pieces. So right now, AI is a buzzword. There's a lot of hype around ChatGPT and generative AI, but what I think people forget is that machine learning and artificial intelligence have had far more successful applications on understanding data than in generating data. So, for example, any business that has an enormous storehouse of data in formats that are asymmetric, in formats that are not usable and need to be converted, right now, that's a major pain point. I mean, it not only is an enormous hurdle for them operationally, but it's an untapped resource that is essentially going to waste. So Inveniam AI, the first tool that will be rolled out, is data extraction and proper structuring of that data. So any business that has data in a variety of challenging formats or file types, that will be the ideal first customer for our release.
And tokenization of real world assets without on-ramps that work for data, the only middleware is 10-finger automation. Am I right? I mean, that is this mechanism. And we want to talk about this, right? AI has been evolving. How we extract data has been evolving. How data lives in multiple resources and where data repositories have been evolving. And Kevin, I'm going to go to you with this, right? About this evolution. I was at the very first, when I worked at Bear Stearns, I was at the very first triple AI conference where we were talking about AI, and we're at I think this is in 2000, I believe, it might have been 99. It was in Austin, Texas, and all we were talking about was constraint-based programming. Do you know what I mean? And that was AI then, right? And it was logistics and trucking and how we were going to get something from one place to another. But not only has data science evolved, right? I mean, I think you got your degree in decision science, not even data science, Kevin, right? From Northwestern. Talk about the evolution of data science and how AI has grown over time.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it was like officially 15 years ago was when we started talking about big data, where suddenly there were storage was cheap enough and things were connected enough that you actually had data big enough to be worthy of the title. And back then, the goal was to centralize all that data in one place and then analyze it locally. And that's what organizations did. But at the same time, Google was teaching us about the value of just, all their source data is still out there on the internet. And all they do is they crawl it, they index it, and they learn from it while it's still out there. And all they're doing is centralizing the insights. And just even responding to a Google query is AI, and people should understand that that's been happening for a long time. But where we are now is that everybody, that the AI tools have progressed to the point where the big data is now too big to be centralized, and pretty much you have to take Google's approach of you leave the data out there, but you want to pull only the insights into a central location. So this leave the data at the edge, put your AI out at the edge, understand the data while it's still out there, and centralize the insights. And we don't yet. I mean, edge computing and edge data are great first draft names for what's happening. Now the data is kind of staying out there at the edge. I don't know that we have the perfect word for it, though, to express how it naturally combines with AI in indexing, in centralizing the insights. But that's where we are now, where the data got too big, that even with 5G connectivity, we don't have the bandwidth or the motivation really to centralize it. And the smarts need to be out there where the data is.
Yeah, and we need to have a decentralized data environment. We need to have systems and architectures that allow that. And you were one of the co-authors of the report we just put out with Capgemini, right, on data at the edge and how that interfaces with blockchain. Maybe just give a shout out on that, on this.
Correct.
Data.
Well, I mean, Capgemini had been doing work on edge data for a while, but the moment was ripe for them to be talking about how blockchain as a distributed ledger technology makes perfect sense to go with data that has been left on the edge. And in particular, this idea of, since it's not necessarily your data that you're working with, but you still need to trust it. You still need to trust that it's been well cared for and unaltered since it happened. It's a very natural application for blockchain to keep a record of data's provenance, even while it just sits out there on the edge. And also we covered a little bit of the techniques that you can use for processing the stuff while it's still out there on the edge, to add the trust, to get the insights without having to take custody of the data at the center.
Yeah, and Rick, I'm gonna come to you real quick on this, and I'm gonna give it to you with the idea that you'll give that softball to Albert to take the next run. But literally, the connection of blockchain to data at the edge, where you can provide proof of origin in financial services, right? Anybody in operations of an alts fund knows this is a massive problem, right? So talk about how big of a problem this is. And then as we begin to automate compute, various types of compute, in smart contracts and in enterprise systems, we have to get that data from the unstructured into the structured. But once it makes its way through AI, if we do that without proof of origin, there's a whole new set of problems, right?
That's absolutely right, Pat. And even without the AI, it's vitally important because there are, with alts, we don't have the listing rules for the exchange. We don't have the level of SEC supervision. We don't have the third-party Big Four audits and the Moody's credit reports, et cetera, to inform potential investors about these assets. So that's what Inveniam does, is collect the company fundamental and performance information and publish it. But how do we make that trustworthy, right? Because we're not Standard & Poor's. And so that's where the blockchain, with its immutability, is so important to us. We use it to record a hash of the documents for irrefutability, for immutability, to anchor their content in, anchor the document's content and in time so that it can be trustworthy, and with a link there back to the source document. So if you can imagine someone creating a spreadsheet that has data elements that came through Inveniam in it to do their analysis of, let's say, how the rents are going to drop off in a commercial real estate building, right? And they say, that just seems wrong to me. They can click on the datum and it'll take it to the source document, the rent roll that, the report that shows the rents and when they're going to stop. And they'll say, that's not right. They don't expire next year, and click on that and get the actual lease. And at each step, there's validation, proof of the state and the content of those documents and their contemporaneous nature on the blockchain. And when we want to, we can put information like an NAV or an appraised value or whatever the owners want to share, right? Because that's an essential element of this edge ownership of data. They own their data. What they want to share can be put onto the blockchain for everybody to see, or it can be on the edge behind their controls to show it only to appropriate people. And it's very exciting.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, if you recall the instructions, I was hoping you'd throw the softball to Albert,
right?
Which we missed. But Albert, I'm going to throw that softball back to you. Talk about AI and proof of origin, right? And how important is that, right? Question number one. Question number two, tell us about what you've been building on top of what we've been doing for 2.5 years. And what is this alpha release, right? When customers lay into this, what are they going to find? What are the benefits they're going to get? And how will this power real world assets trading, and whether it's real estate, infrastructure, private credit, private equity, whatever it is. So talk about blockchain origin and AI, and then let's talk for a minute about what you've been building.
Great. Yeah, so let me start by going back to something that Kevin said, and I'd like to offer an analogy. The correct analogy, I think, of what we're dealing with in the creation of data is we're in a data buffet. There is more data than you could possibly ingest if you had your whole life to do it. In fact, in many cases, we're creating data faster than it can be processed, and many businesses are facing that quandary. So, when you go to a buffet, I don't necessarily want the fillers, want the appetizers. I want the steak. I want the lobster. So you have to be able to see where the gold nuggets are within the data set that you have. And that's simply, given the volume of data today, it simply requires automatic tools, machine learning based tools with artificial intelligence that can sort through impossible quantities of data and find the part that matters. And the better it's trained, the more quickly it can do it and the more volume of data it can handle. So with all that in mind, there's a natural synergy between artificial intelligence and the blockchain, which has all of the data accessible and able to be learned on by those machine learning models. So those synergies are the exact reason why, the establishment of an AI division for a company like Inveniam makes total sense. And rather than being in the business of one particular technology to deal with data, you're simply in the data business. And so that's the the sharpening of focus that is represented by rolling out these various AI products.
And AI is intended to allow real intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence needs to power real intelligence, right? And what happens is real intelligence needs actionable data in order to do this. And so what they do is they throw, this is my, hackneyed response, right? First year Cornell grads against it, right? Which is mind numbing, right? As they're going through all of this, instead of how do we get these really cool new tools to run through this vast amount of data, deliver it up, and those first year Cornell grads are then starting to use their brain, right? And not just do book reports, right? And literally deliver that up to the portfolio managers, the admins, the valuation experts, right? Whatever it might be, where they're marking the asset, they're running the waterfall, they're doing the expense allocations, they're delivering that up so that the market can start to trade these things, right? And talk about the delivery of AI to a commercial use, not for a plaything, right? And not for a thing so I can write my high school paper, which, is cool for a lot of people. I don't know that the long-term trend of that is great for America, right? But what is that, what is AI delivered for a commercial use going to look like right now? And what's it going to look like in 5 years?
So I'm reminded of a famous quote that's attributed to Henry Ford. It goes, "If I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses." And that's kind of a nice way to express the limitations of our humanity and our human thinking, because a lot of the insights that are generated from data come from places that you might not have even been looking, and you might not have even been expecting to provide value. But there's a lot of strength in human decision making still. So I think the future is in AI assisted decision making, not necessarily algorithmic decision making left alone. I think that's going to be the short and medium term use cases that we see. So delivering products for commercial use with AI technology really involves further empowering individual decision makers to make better decisions, to make them more quickly, and to make them about information that they otherwise might not have access to, but for tools that allow them to widen their range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna take this a step back, right? We've had, your Henry Ford quote. I'm gonna go to Tim Berners-Lee talking about semantic web and what he wrote about that, 20 years ago. And as he was writing about semantic web, and we went from taxonomy to folksonomy, which was, taxonomy is, we understand dollars to euros, right? We understand, the attribute, not necessarily what the value is, right? But the attribute, we have a taxonomy that's mapped over to that. Folksonomy is not the, what the attribute is, but how it's used. And this is where you get the innovation, where you're all of a sudden started to talk about data in new ways so you can find insights in new areas, right? And Kevin, I want to talk to you a little bit about this as we think about data and where it's going, and taxonomy versus folksonomy. And I'll just tee it up to you with that.
Right, or the other taxonomy that people are used to is the idea of, in biology, you have your dog-like creatures, and then you have your wolves and your foxes and your, in other words, the nice thing about taxonomies is that they're very precise and that they're sort of enforceable. The bad thing about them is that they're arbitrary and they're not really how the data is actually used. So the nice thing about neural networks and the new sort of more folksonomy compatible is that they're closer to what people naturally understand, or natural language processing. So and the Chat GPT sounds very human when it's talking. The downside of Folksonomy is you can't ask the question, where did you come up with that answer? The nice thing about taxonomies is or even those constraint-based and rule-based AIs is you could tell where they got the data and how they processed it and how they came up with it. So when we're all seeing the power of Folksonomy for getting at the human understanding of things, for being able to naturally process without a lot of predetermined rules or programming, Folksonomy is great at that kind of processing that we're seeing everywhere, but it's lousy at the where did you get this number? How do I know that, you read of all of humanity's thoughts on this subject and you came up with that answer? How do we know that you got it from the right place? And so we're all seeing the power of Folksonomy. We're all seeing the power of sort of fuzzy AI, as it would have been called 20 years ago. But the problem is footnotes, a precise understanding of how do I know I can trust that answer? And so the ability of Inveniam's particular ability to provide a footnote that sort of, when all the AI is done, where would we have our users and the analysts in the world look for the answer? It's great to be able to trace it back to, a particular phrase in a particular source document that is unchanged since it was created by a particular author. That's still a very necessary thing that we can't lose sight of while we're dazzled by the fancy talking of
by the generative AI,
yeah.
the ability to write a book report and by the way, or a legal brief, that when it is fuzzy or hallucinating and pointing to court cases that don't exist, the consequences there are meaningful, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And we go to, and if you'll forgive me for this analogy, right? The logical positivist works when you exist in a world of compute where everything is a number and the number foots to an Edgar database, right? But what happens if the Edgar database, it doesn't exist, right? And then how do you begin to impute trust into broad sources of data at a volume that are exponentially larger than what you can find in an Edgar database? And you're going to process that in order to do it, to make a decision, right? And this is where you need to understand the data that we need to process and move at speed for all the alternative markets to trade on a primary or secondary basis. And that volume, both of comps and about the underlying asset itself, it's incredibly important to process a lot of data with pointers that this is the right data, so that you could say, okay, A, thank you for this value. B, where did I get it from? Yep, I think that's the right data set. Go, move quickly. But if they don't have any idea of the data, the level of trust in there is ridiculous. And so what we need to do is continue to point to these underlying mechanisms for multiple parties to participate in the maintenance of an ecosystem from which we draw data, right? And Rick, I'm gonna throw it to you, following up on the footnotes that Kevin says, and what we're doing, and why does this matter for alternatives? You know what I mean? And their systems, but not only for the people who on the buy side or the sell side, but let's talk buy side mostly, but the sell side, but also those who are administering that pre-trade, post-trade.
Well, of course. So, I mean, first I'll say something that Kevin has said to me before is sort of that which distinguishes an alternative investment from a mainstream investment is the quality and transparency and trustworthiness of the publicly available data, right? So we start in a world where the data is not there and not clear. And getting the answers is tough. We could have someone say, well, here's a folder on my SharePoint. It has scanned it's got, scans from a scanner of the 187 different subscription documents that record money that we've raised through our Series A and our B preferred and our C and a private placement over here. Now, please make my capital stack clear and transparent so some new investor can come in and understand where they're going to sit in a waterfall distribution at the success of a transaction to get out of the thing. Wow. Having AI say, well, I think you'll probably get some money back doesn't work, right? We need to go through and understand each of those subscription documents. We have to have a clear taxonomy, not an ambiguous one, that understands exactly what the capital contribution account is and the interest paid on that capital contribution account and what the carried interest is for the GP, et cetera, et cetera. We have to capture all of that, feed that into the report, into the AI perhaps to answer questions. But when those answers come in a report generated by a human intelligence or artificial intelligence, you've got to be able to say, how do you know that? Right? And click on it and end up back at that source document. So that maybe it's a few layers, right? How do you know that? I know it from this summary report. How do you know that? Here's the specific document you're asking for. That's truth. And AI can give an answer, but if you don't believe it because AI hallucinates, because AI makes stuff up, because AI uses terms.
Or we need an oracle, because you need to be able to trust that data because you don't have the freedom to see it because there's GDPR or there's CPP requirements, right? Which also then gets into what AI tool can I actually use that's not then going to make that open to the public domain, right? And this is, everybody loved all the free stuff in 7, 8, 9, 10 until the other shoe dropped. And all of a sudden we realized, no, it wasn't the free thing that was the product. We were the product, right? If you're getting something for free, you are the product. And all of a sudden, all of your data was being marketed against your will or without your knowledge. And then everybody said, whoa, time out. And all these rules came into place, the right to be forgotten, all these things. And for businesses that have legal requirements as a fiduciary to maintain data in an efficient way, every AI tool is not created the same, right? And Albert, this gets to what you're talking about, right? This is why GPT 3.5 Turbo can be used and 4 cannot if there's any kind of requirements around that. And Albert, I think this is really what your job is going to be, right? You are the person that businesses are going to come to and they're going to say, here's the requirements, here's what I need, which tool do I use, how do my employees set up a template, how do I extract data on the most efficient basis that's legally compliant and regulatorily compliant. But then also, and this is kind of the biggest one, in the next 5 years, when so much venture money is being thrown at AI, they're going to subsidize us to use it. And how do we arb that, right? And how do you help them arb the best way to access that data?
Yeah, so allow me to raise a point that we're kind of dancing around, which I think is really important, which is the reason why innovation is what's driving all this innovation is competition. If you can make decisions more quickly than your competitor, it's a competitive advantage. If you can take advantage of investments that you otherwise would literally not have enough time to vet because you have the technological infrastructure now to do it within an amount of time to where the opportunity does not pass you by, it's an advantage. There are major advantages in utilizing the type of infrastructure that we have designed. And I think that is an important point to raise, because Blockbuster was a great business. It was a wonderful business. They wanted to make their money on their late fees and their popcorn until one day it wasn't. And that obsolescence is something that a business needs to prepare for years in advance. And the only way to do it is to innovate ahead of when you actually have a dire need for it. It needs to be out of ambition rather than out of being forced. But there are industries that are just being forced to innovate, and they have the opposite problem. where some compliance infrastructure is coming into place, and they have to get all their systems in line to be able to satisfy those requirements, and they're light years away. And that looming, deadline can be just as problematic for a business as an upstart innovative competitor.
Yeah, and I for those of us who lived through the Blockbuster Netflix transition, right? Netflix didn't begin delivery of their movies over the actual vehicle that allowed them to explode, which was broadband. They did it through the mail as an interim step, and that step sucked. Right? Let's all recall that, right? For any of you who had a Netflix thing and you got the envelope and you got that DVD and you put it in for your kid and it was completely scratched and it wouldn't play and you're like, oh, I hate Netflix, right? It was horrible. That interim step is where we are with blockchain today. And we are mailing that DVD through because the vehicle and the infrastructure is not yet fully built out. Albert, what you're building and what you're delivering to the market is a key component of allowing broadband delivery, right? Of that movie to stream, et cetera, those games to stream, et cetera, that's going to allow it to explode. And this evolution of going to a store to ordering it on your phone, right, or having subscriptions, it comes in chunky pieces until it's fluid, and then everybody only remembers that it was always thus, right? You know what I mean? Like you don't remember the chunky pieces along the way. And I think the things that are going to happen is we start to see people who get a piece right. Coinbase, Robinhood, right? They have a piece right, and they've exploited it, and now they're growing that. And as they do so, the biggest banks in the world are going to either catch up or they're going to forever be relegated to, history's footnote. And I look at innovators here, and I think of Wisdom Tree, and especially their CEO's, interview this week where he talks about their leadership. They've got 17 different 40 Act funds that you can buy on your phone, and they're trading real time on blockchain. How are ETFs going? And he's saying we're going to lever that into every market we can because we have a multi-year technology advantage and we're not going to stop. Wow. Like that, I'm telling you, that's changing. Alt's going here. And everybody said it. BlackRock has said this. Blackstone has said this. KKR has said this. Apollo has said this. Digital distribution is how they grow. But if they don't have data, how do they deliver digitally, right? And I think, Albert, I'm going to turn it back to you, and then we'll kind of go around the horn because we're kind of a little bit later on in this in the conversation. I'd like to offer anybody who's online, please put your questions into the chats, and we'll see the chat and see if we can answer them. But Albert, as these alts companies want to scale digital, is there a way to do that without AI?
I don't think so. And you see kind of an arms race between everybody. You have the Microsofts of the world and Google and Meta and Apple. I mean, everybody is going into AI, and it's a pretty simple reason. As digital mechanisms get more sophisticated, they generate more data, and there's more data to deal with and process. I mean, it used to be that your 56K internet, like, it loaded a web page pretty slow, but it worked, it functioned, and now, I mean, we're generating data exponentially all the time. And so not only is artificial intelligence mandatory as kind of the sidecar of any aspect of your business, but you need to have robust applications and expertise amongst the tools that you use and amongst your whole organization in order to capitalize on that. And it revolutionizes itself fairly quickly. Every day there seems to be a new innovation.
And I think one of the things that we want to distinguish is Inveniam and Inveniam AI are helping the alts world and the private markets world participants access AI more efficiently to get their unstructured data structured, right? We are.
That's exactly right.
We're a consumer of all sorts of AI tools. This is what we're doing. Again, this is at the bottom of the screen. We invite anybody to join us as an alpha release partner. Come in. We'd love to see you as a user of our AI tool, where you're able to credential where the data came from. How do we get there fast? Give us the feedback. We need partners who are helping us do this and are crunching this. So we'd love it if you would come in and be an alpha release user. Rick, talk to me about where the private markets legacy tech stack lives in this question, right? I mean, and these legacy tech stacks, they are old, 40 years old, 50 years old, in Cobalt, that are they are scared to death, right? Rutgers has a new major in Cobalt, which is shocking because these are people needed to maintain old databases, right? How does this touch that? How does Inveniam, working with these different systems, where does this go, and how do we work with the legacy in place systems?
Well, we can access the data where it resides. So let's say there's a system written in COBOL. And 40 years isn't that old, Pat. I'm older than 40.
I think a number of us on this call are.
So taking a report out of that system and then being able to anchor it in content, in time, and parse the data from it and make it available to smart contracts or to systems on the edge using the blockchain as a system of record, but needing to process on the edge, is vitally important. And the way we've built our system is the center of it is the federated data room. So we don't take a copy of the data from all of these other systems and pull it together in yet another copy to be out of sync, yet another data lake to violate privacy laws or to be attacked by hackers or whatever. We look at it where it sits. So we'll look at the customer's S3 bucket or look at the customer's Microsoft SharePoint or look into via an API or extracted files. I mean, the first APIs were all take a file and ship it. And there's still plenty of that happening in the world. Anchor it in content, in time, extract the information we need. If it's a structured report, it's really easy to extract the data, right? It's when it's a contract with handwritten notes that it's hard work. And then we've got what we need. And I would say that's what's critically important. And that has to feed then the AI tools, which can help make decisions, and we can gain productivity. Albert alluded to this, but when it's human beings manually pulling the data out of all these contracts, it's expensive. You can only do so many. You can only afford to do so many. But by using these AI tools and plugging them into our process, we're not trying to write anything. We don't want to write the next ChatGPT. We don't have the $200 million to do it. Plus, that's a red ocean. But by using all these tools, we can get it down to where it's affordable for a customer to come to us and say, I have 15,000 leases. Give me back a structured database. So I can now say, show me what's happening to the rent per square foot of 2-bedroom apartments by metro area that started, but the source data was in this huge collection of scanned leases that were completely impossible to compute on. That's what's so exciting to me.
Or, and Albert, I'm going to throw this back to you real quick. Or the individual accountant at a regional accounting firm who just need to extract the data because they're under the gun and they're happy to pay $50 to extract this that they're going to pass on to their clients so they can have all the data done and the financials done faster and delivered quicker, et cetera, because it's easier to pay than for them to do it themselves doing the entry, and their client's going to be happier, and they're just doing that high value knowledge work, right? I mean, it at one end of the scale, 50,000 leases, yes, absolutely. But another part of this is literally this is one set of financials at a time for one multifamily housing project, right? Or one infrastructure asset.
Yeah. So along that point, I think one of the big areas that we'll see for growth in AI tools is fraud detection. You know, imagine if Bernie Madoff had ChatGPT to be able to generate all the fake client reports and all the monthly statements. You know, it's going to get to the point where it's an arms race where you need AI fraud detection to capture and to detect AI fraud. And so it's something that's going to be really mandatory for businesses that have a strong fraud detection component.
And if you're not able to anchor that fraudulent, that your document into the blockchain with a pointer of record within a system that generates it, people are going to doubt that it's real, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, there was a whole, you know, all through history, whether we're talking about wax seals, right, mm-hmm. or a certified letter that a postman was signing, right, all the way to, I know that this data lives in this system behind this firewall, and I can see it anchored into this blockchain. And if it doesn't come from there, I know that AI can spoof it. You know what I mean? And we've got to be able to prove origin of this for this fraud detection. And I think that there's a whole evolution of data management that's coming, right? And with data at the edge. And Kevin, we're going to go through, do kind of a last comment from everybody. Talk about data at the edge. Talk about data, Kevin, and where it's going to go. And in 5 years, 10 years time, are we going to see how much more applications at the edge and data at the edge and the need to prove the source of a document? How much is that? How important is that going to be?
It's going to be critical. It's a lot like these thinking about how AI is not just, I mean, this is building off of what Albert said, is AI, it will not just be a tool for proving that things are true. It will also be a tool that makes it easier to make more convincing fakes. We've seen this with pictures of people, and how it's going to be natural to want to have one set of AI tools looking for the frauds made by the other set of tools. So I'm sure that footnotes are going to be part of that, and being able to trace the provenance of data back as far as possible is going to be part of that long-term game.
And what are these footnotes? When you say footnotes, you mean anchors in blockchain with a zero knowledge proof, the ability to validate this is the document that created at this place, right? You're speaking
is that what a modern footnote will look like? Is not just to a reference to a book that you might be able to check out from a library. The point is, it's a pointer that should take you right there to the source system and let you see it. It really is also the promise of hypertext, of being able to just keep clicking further and further back. And I suspect that we will actually at some point hire the AIs to do that clicking and inspecting to make sure that all of the footnotes that we have gathered and built into these documents actually get checked. You know, that it's not just that you see a footnote, it's that if you actually did go to page 56 in that source document, that you would see data there that is supportive of the truth that is trying to be conveyed. So this being able, you know, whether you think of it as edge data or just kind of this infinite clickability, this very deep data, and maybe that's a better word for the next generation of data, but we're going to need to preserve that set of breadcrumbs or infinite footnotes as part of a scheme that we don't fully understand yet, of how we prove that things are true and how we prove that they are true in the real world for real world assets.
And Rick, what part of this, as a pragmatist, a little bit of a cynic, a technologist who's been leading, who has a Devo energy hat on the top of his stormtrooper, right?
Energy dome, get the taxonomy right.
Thank you. Sorry. And, you know, as we have that, and you look at where trading of private markets is going to go,
sure,
and how we service them and what we need to do to service them, what is the impact of this going to be on private markets?
I think it's huge. I think that an asset's not tradable, not liquid, unless you have fresh, trustworthy information available when and where you need it. And if it takes 4 months and $200,000 of accountants and $200,000 of lawyers to do a trade, which is what it's like right now for an office building, there's a huge depression of price because liquidity is worthy. And it's not just to do the trade, it's to get insurance, it's to get a loan against it.
It's
everything.
The diligence to see if you want to trade it, right?
Exactly. So AI is going to make it possible for us to ingest the information at a far greater rate and quality and quantity than we could before. The blockchain plus the cryptographic stuff, the zero knowledge proofs you talked about, will answer the little kid question. Do you remember in the movie Uncle Buck, the kid says, why, over and over again. And Uncle Buck probably says, why do you ask these questions? He says, I'm a kid, that's my job. But when AI comes up with some answer, we need to be able to say, why, and push farther back and trust that stuff using the blockchain to use consensus proof of the content and the immutability of it, and using the cryptographic zero knowledge proofs of the content of the document to have irrefutability. And so lots more data that we can trust. AI delivers that, blockchain delivers that, and then answering questions that we wouldn't presume to ask before because it was just too hard.
Albert, you have the final word. You have the final word here, buddy.
What I want everyone to leave with is the idea that we are in the midst of an AI gold rush, except unlike a real gold rush, there's an infinite amount of gold. AI tools have never been more accessible, more usable by people with very little technical ability and no technical background. You can use them speaking everyday language. And our intention is to create useful tools that have immediate value for your business right away using AI technology and machine learning. And so we've put up the link for the application to get access to our alpha release of Inveniam AI. And if you're interested, please fill that out and we'll get back to you as soon as it's available.
I think the very core of what banking is going to come under discussion and scrutiny with this evolution. Meaning, I'm taking hedge fund like enterprise risk when I'm depositing my dollars into a bank above $250,000, right? And I understand everybody goes, oh, but the government's going to bail everybody out. No, they're not, and they can't, right? And by the way, that cost gets transferred to someone. But what's happening is when I have the ability to deposit my paycheck into a series of assets that have liquidity and price discovery on them that I can then cycle out of, and I can connect it to my MasterCard, and I can then use my phone all of a sudden to buy a latte because of my MasterCard is connected to it. And then the next thing you know, that is liquidating some small portion of an ETF or an interval fund or a portfolio of multifamily housing. Who is lending? Who is funding new development? And how the entire capital stack is being created is going to be redefined. And how people save their money, store their money, and transfer their money. And that store of value is going to change if we have good data. And I think AI assists as a mechanism to drive data onto compute functions that allow us to value and create this neural network of knowledge and relationship of how one asset's performing against another and its relative value. The markets are going to open up not just in America, globally, and people are going to have to seek alpha in new regions, new geographies, new sectors. And this is going to be an explosion that better data is going to allow. Albert, I'm super pleased to have you on this podcast and part of Inveniam and leading Inveniam AI. And we're looking forward to having you on many more of these podcasts. And Kevin and Rick, thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, everyone.